Western North Carolina has a new voice. This is the Pete Kaliner Show on News Radio 570 WWNC. Call Pete now at 240-9962 or 1-800-570-9962. You can also join the discussion on Facebook and Twitter at News Radio 570. Now, Pete Kaliner.
All right, on the agenda today, Buncombe County Sheriff Van Duncan will join us later to talk about the deputy shooting. We discussed it at some length yesterday, got your take on it, so we'll talk to the sheriff today about that. Also, a milestone in the Pete Kaliner Show here, which is that I received my first love mail. So we'll take a look at that, and you can offer me some advice on how to respond to the author of said love mail. But first, let's bring in Ethan Wingfield. He is a native of Buncombe County. He is a conservative Republican, and he is running for Congress in the 11th District. That's the seat being vacated by Heath Schuler. Welcome, Mr. Wingfield. How are you, sir?
Thank you, Pete. I'm doing well.
Good.
Good to be on the show.
Well, appreciate you making some time for us. Let me start off with, I guess, just some basics. Give us your bio. Give us a little thumbnail sketch of who you are.
Sure. Well, like you said, I'm a native of Buncombe County. I grew up right here on the north side of Buncombe County, Weaverville. I'm the third of six kids here. Grew up homeschooled, and so this is home for me. I went away for a few years. Had the good fortune of going to Brown University and studied there for a few years. Got my bachelor's degree. Started a company, grew it up for a few years, and then was able to sell that company, and then took a position working as the advisor to the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, and have done that for the last few years. And but I've gotten to the point now where I cannot stand the direction that I see this country going, and I don't want to see my kids grow up and inherit the country that I fear that we're going to have in a few years with the trajectory that we're on. And so that's why I've decided to get in this race and run for Congress, because I think we need some serious change up in Washington.
I would be remiss if I did not ask you, a major in philosophy. I saw in your bio you earned a bachelor's degree in philosophy. Who let you do that? That is just not. That's not. I don't know if that's a particularly marketable degree, but you made a very good life for yourself off of it.
I heard the same thing from my parents and a number of other folks. But philosophy is really, it's really, you learn how to think critically and learn how to think for yourself. And so I found it to be a great way to really sort of learn to articulate myself, formulate my own positions, and be well-grounded in those, and be able to, advocate and argue forcefully for those. And I found that to be helpful in the business world, and I think it'll be helpful once I'm elected to Congress as well.
Right. I actually had enough credits for a minor in philosophy, although I opted for political science. I had the credits for that, and I said that might actually get me further than the philosophy. But I agree completely on the philosophy front that, and it's why I believe an unchallenged idea is easy to hold. If you're not ever forced to defend your position, how do you really believe it, and how do you then kind of shore up your belief in that? In whatever it is, how do you shore that up from attack from other people? How do you defend yourself?
Yeah, and Pete, going away to a place like Brown, it's an incredibly liberal institution. A lot of the people around there are pretty liberal, and going there as a philosophy major, conservative, I think was one of the best things for me in terms of helping me sort of firm up my beliefs, because it, like you said, it forced me to go into an environment where I had to defend myself. And, some people might go into that environment and end up sort of caving and sort of becoming like everybody else. I left there more ardent in my conservative beliefs than I think I was going in. And you're right. I mean, being forced to defend and articulate your views is a really good thing.
Well, and also a philosophy is really what you want to hear from candidates, because individual issues come and go, but if you don't know their underlying philosophy, you have no sense. You can't gauge how they might vote on something in the future that you can't even contemplate yet. The issues of next year are not necessarily the issues that we're looking at right now. Some will be the same, but a lot of them won't. So, so if I know where you stand on limited government or taxation, sort of a general philosophical foundation, I have a pretty good sense then of how you'll vote on any given issue.
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you, what is your philosophy on? We'll start at sort of a broad idea of federalism and the role of the federal government and its relationship with the states.
Yeah, that's a great and fundamental and profound question. My view is the federal government should have a pretty limited purpose, and I think the Constitution makes that very clear. And I'd love to see folks in Washington refer back to the Constitution more often than they seem to do now. One of the beautiful things about democracy is that it frees people to create a government that best suits them. But I think that works best at the local level. A township where you have a few hundred people who come together and they decide the rules for their community. That's something that really works well, and people can decide how they want to live, and they can create a system of rules around that. And so I think that small governments are really good. Local governments that are close to the people are good. Now, I think the problem you run into when you get into higher and higher levels of government, statewide government, and especially the federal government, is they cover such a broad range of people, and they're so detached from the people. They can't do anything but be really detached and just get a lot of things wrong when they try to be really big and invasive. I think we're seeing that right now. I mean, you look at all the ways the federal government is inserting itself into the lives of people, into business, and it's just into how the local governments do their business. It's just it's insane, and it's really putting this country in a chokehold right when it needs to be set free. And this is something that I'm really concerned about.
Well, how do you then combat that growth, which has been going on for decades under the rule of both parties? How do you combat that?
Yeah, well, it's tough. It's a slow process. The first step has got to be stop the growth of the government, because right now, under both Republicans and Democrats, the federal government has just ballooned. I mean, over the last 10 or 20 years, the government has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. I saw a statistic the other day that just blew my mind. In 2010, the Obama administration added 80,000 pages to the federal law. Mm-hmm. Rules and regulations and laws, 80,000 pages. And that's just being piled on top of other laws. I think what we've got to do is we need to first stop the growth of that, and then we need to start unwinding some of it. And the unwinding is really difficult. I don't know if you're a reader of The Economist magazine, but this was the front page issue in the last issue of this magazine, and they talked about how entrenched these regulations can become, where even once big draconian regulations get put in place, major companies then sometimes actually, even though they're harmful regulations, actually lobby to keep them in place because they've spent all this money complying with the regulations, and if they get undone, then they have to spend more money, learning how to adapt to that new world. So you've got even companies and sometimes people who are suffering under this sort of oppressive, invasive government, sometimes are actually resistant to unwinding it. So there are a lot of entrenched forces that need to be held at bay in order to unwind it. But
well, and not only that, you have the perverse scenario where the companies that have these that are complying. A good example, the Frank Dodd, Financial Reform Act, where now these companies are hiring armies of lawyers and accountants. These banks are, the smaller banks, they can't afford to do that, and so
absolutely,
it's the regulation is providing a direct benefit, essentially, to these larger banks. Yes, they have to hire more people and they got more personnel costs in order to comply, but what they're going to do is run the other competitors, the smaller guys, out of business completely and let the big banks who survive come in and buy up those assets.
Oh, absolutely. And you know what? The banking industry, it's a critical industry to our economy. This Dodd-Frank legislation, it's emblematic of the overreach of the federal government and bad regulation. And back in the 90s, there were 15,000 banks in the United States. Today there are 8,000, and these banks are getting bought up by these mega banks that are just getting bigger and bigger, and they're buying up these smaller banks. But you know what? These small banks, these corner community banks, are critical components of our economy and for small businesses. And you're right. Dodd-Frank and all the other regulations there, if you're a one-branch bank and suddenly you've got to spend a few million, guess what? Telling regulatory agencies, draft up a set of regulations on this particular issue or on that particular issue. And so ultimately Dodd-Frank is not going to be 800 pages. It's going to be thousands and thousands of pages of regulation.
Right, and it's drawn up by the regulators and not the elected representatives.
Right, in a way that members of Congress and frankly the public don't really have much control over.
Yeah, I am of the opinion that the federal government has gotten to the point that in the 80,000 new pages of laws. It corroborates this, that we've gotten to a point where there are so many laws, it is essentially a tipping point now. And I believe that's why the economy is having a real hard time getting back on its feet, because in the past, there were fewer regulations and the rebounds could occur more quickly. Now, with the regulations just keep coming and they keep getting piled on and the rules keep getting piled on, and it makes it more and more difficult. I believe we're at a tipping point economically.
I think I fear that you might be right. And this goes from all the way from the big companies to the little companies. I saw it when I was working, with the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, how it hamstrings major corporations. And I saw it when I was building my own company and all the ridiculous regulations you have to put up with. And I just spoke with a small business owner the other day over in Caldwell County, who was telling me, I'm drowning. I'm going out of business because of all, I spend all my days doing paperwork and paying all these little fees here and there. And, and I think the way the government justifies it is they say, well, it's just one little form. It's not a big deal. It takes 5 minutes to fill out or whatever. Sure. But it's just one more.
Right, it's the cumulative impact that gets you.
What people lose sight of is, it's not just one form; it's the 1,001 form that they had to fill out that year, and over time, this stuff piles on and just becomes unmanageable.
Right.
In the Dodd-Frank legislation, there was a required a form that one type of financial company has to fill out. I think it was a hedge fund or something like that. And when the regulators drafted it up, it turned out to be, I think, 192 pages, this form. And somebody estimated that it was going to cost these companies $150,000 to fill out the form. I mean, it's unreal.
Yeah.
And the Small Business Administration just released a study saying that the average small business spends $10,585, I think, per employee complying with regulations like this. You can't have a dynamic growth economy that can spring back from recessions like the one we just went through when you've got all this sort of regulation all around your throat.
Yeah. Ethan Wingfield is my guest. He is running for Congress in North Carolina's 11th district out here. It's the Heath Shuler district, although it's been redrawn. And he's one of several candidates in the field. Can you hang around for a couple more minutes, Mr. Wingfield?
Oh, glad to.
Okay. Hang on. More with Mr. Wingfield. Ethan Wingfield up next.
The Pete Kaliner Show.
All right, News Radio 570 WWNC. We are speaking with Ethan Wingfield. He is running for Congress in the 11th district here. This is the Heath Shuler seat. Shuler says he's not running for re-election, so it's kind of opening the field up a little bit for you. So, Mr. Wingfield, how many? Well, I won't ask you to talk about your opponents, but what do you plan to do to get past your opponents in the primary?
Sure. Well, I think we're going to have some pretty clear choices to make in this primary, the Republican Party. The campaign that I'm running, it's about the solutions that we need up in Washington. I'm not, I'm a businessman. I'm not a politician, and so when I look at what's going on up in Washington. I see a place that's desperately in need of people who are not focused on the politics of the issues, but focused on the solutions that people need. I think one of the things that separates me from the field of other Republicans is, I'm on the younger side of things. And so when I look at the future, and when I read the Congressional Budget Office's forecasts of how much debt this country is going to be in 10 or 20 or 30 years from now, I measure those dates in terms of how old my children are going to be, and so when this country, if based on the path that we're on, gets to the level of indebtedness that Greece is in right now, I'm going to have young kids. When my kids are in college or graduating from college, the country, based on current projections, is going to be at a place where no other country has ever been that indebted, and so we don't even know what happens. Probably you enter into some debt trap, economic spiral, and so for me, this stuff is personal. This is real. We're talking about my life and my children's lives, and this requires not some politician who's going to go to Washington and just sort of pull the lever. This takes somebody who is going to go up there and fight and fight and fight for real solutions that are going to turn this country around, because I'm invested. I need this country to turn around, because this is the country that I have to live with for a long time, and that I want to pass on to my children. I want my children to grow up in an America that we can all be proud of. And the way that we're headed right now, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, you're only 26 years. You're 26 years old, so that is very young for congressional standards, I guess. But yeah, so you are part of the generation that's probably going to have to start paying this back. I am as well. Not much older than you. Ethan Wingfield, I appreciate you joining us today. Good luck on the campaign trail. We'll talk again with you soon.
Thank you so much. Glad to come back anytime.
All right, sounds good. I appreciate it. Good luck to you. And the forum is open also here for other candidates. We'll be talking with them in the run-up to the primaries and into the general as well. Up next, we'll be speaking with Buncombe County Sheriff Van Duncan. That's up next.